So welcome everybody to join this webinar tonight. Our webinar title, A Housing Conundrum, Are There Alternatives to Public and Private Housing, hosted by AIA Hong Kong chapter. And my name is Derek Leung, the moderator of the event tonight. So tonight we will discuss one of the most pressing issues in Hong Kong, housing. As many of us know that the average waiting time for affordable public housing has edged beyond 6 years, while landlords in the private sector divide and subdivide units into tiny, barely habitable nano-flats. So maybe a big question for us is, are there ways to mitigate or overcome our housing conundrum? Would transitional housing be a good alternative to break the dichotomy between public and private housing? Tonight, we are very, very happy to have invited Professor Rosman Wai from the University of Hong Kong, Professor KK Ling from JCDC at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, and Ms. Queenie Kwok from Hong Kong Council of Social Service to share their valuable insights to us. So tonight, the first presentation will be made by Professor Rosman Wai. Professor Wai is a practicing architect who has expert knowledge of public housing in Hong Kong. She's an adjunct associate professor at the Faculty of Architecture at the University of Hong Kong. He was also the vice president of the Hong Kong Institute of Architects and a founding council member of the Hong Kong Institute of Architectural Conservationists. So Professor Wai, please.
Yes, and thank you, Derek. So let me share. Okay. Good evening, everyone. And tonight I will be sharing the solutions in public housing to how to solve this housing conundrum. About the public housing, and we have altogether slightly more than 190 housing estates in Hong Kong, and which house about 30% of the population, and which is more than 2 million people. And the average living space now is 13.5 square meter. And these are the recently completed building. As you can see, they're very tall. Its average is 40-story high, and building on top of the podium. The podium, which houses these wet markets, or the shopping center, and also the educational facilities ranging from kindergarten, primary school to secondary school. And because our housing estate is usually very large, and then we have our transportation nodes within the housing estate. And for the recreation area, and then it is provided for the different ages, for the kids, and also for like fitness equipment for the elderly. And for the greening ratio is about 20 to 30% of the area. This is inside the housing flat. And then, although we do not provide a partition here, but then the design is such that it is with a notional partition in mind. And then the kitchen, and then bathroom, and well lit and also well ventilated public corridor. The lift lobby is modest, but it is with it is made 24 hours a day, and then with a CCTV as well. And then for the mailbox, and then in fact it is I think it is not even found in the private sector. That at the back, in fact, there is a mail room for the delivery, and at the roof, and then it is since from the new millenniums, and then all the roofs are with these PV panels to provide the electricity for the public lighting. So we don't have the housing problem, right at the early colonial time. And because, as you can see from the British Parliament, the Foreign Secretary in 1841, he said, Hong Kong, a barren island with hardly a house appointed. And then so at the time, the city of Victoria is still building up, and then we don't have any problem. And then at that time, what we lived is in this kind of Chinese shop houses, or what we call Tonglao, and with the shops at the ground floor and residential part on at the top floors. But because of the incessant immigrants from mainland China, and then population swell. And so even within one floor of the Tonglao, and then it is further subdivided into cabins, 6 to 7, and then by the side, these are the bunk beds, which can be up to 2 or 3 tiers, and a shared stove area, or you can call this a kitchen. And so the condition then was overcrowding in sanitation and also poverty, and which is the worst case in the Taiping-Shan district. And in 1894, and there is the bubonic plague, and which killed 30,000 people in 3 decades. And immediately after the start of the bubonic plague, and then so the government decided to resume the 10 acres of land, and then now it turned into the Bray Garden, and so you can still see this park there, stating the history. And afterwards, and then which leads to, so the government now set some guidelines or some ordinance. And in 1903, in fact, that is the first building ordinance in Hong Kong, which is called the Public Health and Buildings Ordinance of 1903. And it sets new standards for design and occupancy of the Tonglao. And then it stated requirements of the windows, the back lanes, the water supplies, and also the minimum internal floor area. So if you can recognize this, now this is the point in Wan Chai, this one. So insatiable or housing demand, comes especially after the Second World War, when all the people come back to Hong Kong, and also after the war, and then so many houses were destroyed. So people, whenever they can find a space, they'll erect their own shed. And the living condition was really poor. And also at that time, there is a water ration because, before 1964, when the Eastern River supplied the continuous water to us, and then it was a problem. And because after the war, in fact, Hong Kong needs to develop its economy. And so therefore, the government has tried many ways. First one is to encourage those voluntary agencies and religious bodies to build this kind of more permanent cottage, which is use the stone or bricks, and to provide either housing, kind of a living accommodation for the low income group. Although it is about $1,000 at a time, but then it is not affordable for common people. And another endeavors by the government is to house its own employee. And so, of course, for those expatriates, they have all the time they provide quarters, but not for the local people. So they encourage the civil servants to gather together to form this kind of a civil servants cooperative building society. And so they will employ their own architects, engineers, and to design the building, and they chip in money. And the government will help out in the giving a concession rent for the land, and which is usually about 1/3 of the market price. And the government set the standards. So like for small unit, it is 1,000 square feet, and for bigger unit, it is 1,200 square feet. And of course, to us, this is a very luxurious in these days, right? And then at that time, there are about 230 of this building society. The first one was in Chatham Garden, Chatham Road, and then so which is demolished now. And then the second one is the Belcher Gardens, now turned into the Belchers. And there are still a lot in everywhere in Kowloon and Hong Kong. And another way the government has tried is to encourage those private sector to build housing for the low income group. And then the first one is the Model Housing Society. And then they built the Model Housing Estate in 1954, and together with HSBC at that time. And now it is the oldest surviving public housing in Hong Kong. And in 1948, and getting some money from the donation money from the London Mayor, and Bishop Hall started the Hong Kong Housing Society. and built this Shanglei Oak in Shamsui-Po in 1952. And because there wasn't any examples to follow, as you can see from the plan, it is very good quality. I mean, in terms of the area, and then partitions and wall, and then the kitchen and toilet and balcony as well. And it was to such a high standard that it can never be repeated. And so in later housing society, public housing, and then it is the standard become more modest. And now housing society is still providing about 5% of the public housing in Hong Kong. And another one is in 1954, and the setup of the Hong Kong Housing Authority. In fact, that is not the housing authority that you know of today, which was established in 1973. As you can read from the Chinese, if you can read it, and it is called the Hong Kong Oyu Jinqi Weiyuanwei. It's different from what is now today is the Hong Kong I forget its name. And so, which is, yeah, I'm not Thank you. Okay. And so it is different. And so at that time, they were building that is a kind of like a private setup. And then it is only the government only subsidized the rent of the market of the land of the land price in around 1/3. And they can loan from the government as well. And then they said, so the first one is the North Point Estate, and then which is now demolished for private development. And then so estate is also redeveloped, and all these the other ones is coming up to be demolished and redeveloped. So about Hong Kong's resettlement housing, and it all started in 1953 in the Shakini Village fire, which makes homeless about 53,000 people in one night. And so 4 days afterwards, and then it was the government decided that, okay, shoulder the responsibility to rehouse all these people. And also that is the first time, and which deviate from previous policy, that the Hong Kong government will use the public money to house the local people. So this was the first time. And then at first it was intended to build those what we now call the Bowring Bungalow, which is 2-story high. And then 1 month afterwards, and then the government decided to, well, we should try this experiment of high rise, which is of 6-story high. Okay, and which is 64 units back to back, and then wrapped by balcony access. And the balcony, in fact, is also serve as the kitchen, and also drying area, the kitchen's play, and then whatever, or even sleeping space. And in the middle, there is the communal, in fact, facilities. It's include the public latrine and a water standpoint. And the ground floor is used for the workshop, for the cottage industry, or the shops, and then roof is our famous the primary schools. And it was first designed to accommodate those refugees from natural disaster. Although I don't know why fire is regarded as a natural disaster, okay? And after that, in the 1960s, and the government decided that, well, because it was so successful, and so that is a measure for poverty relief. So we have this Mark series from Mark 2 to Mark 7, and the evolution is according to this technological improvement, like in the Mark 4, because we lifts are available, and so the building shoots up. And then in Mark 5, and then there is we have this self-contained flats. That means they have their own kitchen and toilet and bathroom. And then in Mark 6 and 7, and then the flats become larger. And in 1966 and 1967, that was the riot. And afterwards, and that is the building community is of top priority. So in the twin tower, as you can see, it is a turn. In fact, it is just turning the balcony access inside. But the merit is that, as you can see it, even when you go out to work, and so you can say hi to your neighbors, not only on the same floor, but the floors above and below. And so it can create the sense of neighborliness. And also because at that time we need to develop our extended urban area. So all these estates need to be self-contained in a way that at least they have the markets or shopping area, and even multi-story garage and transportation note. And in Wafu, there is even a library there. And also, the riot is like a watershed in Hong Kong history. And then, so in 1972, we started this 10-year housing program. And then one also of the aim is to provide reasonable environment for the people. And so that means the Mark 1 and 4, we need to upgrade that. And also that for the urban renewal. And also to move 1.5 million into the new territories and the setup of the Housing Authority and the Unified Housing Department. And for the conversion of the Mark 1 and 4, in fact, if you look at the documents in the 1954, when the architects designed the Mark 1, he has already got this conversion plan. But in his memo, he said that, well, although I have decided this, but I don't think that that will be realized. And of course, he's wrong. And for the urban redevelopment, which is mainly in the Kowloon Central at the time, and because all the sites are very narrow and also dissected by roads sometimes, and so a lot of these very linear blocks were developed, and which is much taller than the Mark series. And where possible in the new territories, we can have this a trident block, and which is much larger block, and with more flats per floor, and then much taller. And also it can create more interesting inter-block space for open space. And also in 1978, and then there is a breakthrough that we have this home ownership scheme, because the government think that once when you own the flat, you'll be rooted in the place. So that is to make sure that people stay in Hong Kong at the time. And in 1980s, we face another problem, which is the shortage of the construction workers. And as we can, understand, because in 1970s, we started to have this compulsory education. No parents would like their kids to join the very dangerous construction industry. So there was a shortage of labor. And so at that time, and so we developed this new harmony block, and then which is based on a modular design. So that means this is a module, and then so if we want more flats, and then so we act on the rooms, and then which is good for the mechanization and in the construction, and also the prefabrication, like the semi-precast slab or staircase or drywall or facade, or even bathroom and kitchens. They are manufactured in a factory conditions in the Pearl River Delta, and then transport to Hong Kong, and then assemble on site like Lego. And in the new millennium, and then we face another problem, and then that is that because we've been using these standard blocks for over half a century, and so people criticize that all these public housing block makes the cityscape monotonous. And so at that time, we start to have this site-specific design. So we use modular flat, but then it is a different ways of assembling this, and then the core design is different, and so can make the best use of the natural resources in the site, like the views, like the wind and the sunshine, etc. And within this, and then universal design was adopted. And then universal design means that a design can cater for persons with different abilities, and also for the environmental sustainability. And then we use the microclimate studies, and also this carbon emission estimation. And so that is, although it is a small unit, and which is a very high density, high rise building, but then the living condition is still acceptable or comfortable. And now we face another problem, which is a very long waiting time and for the public housing. So what is the panacea? So this is the question that I want to throw back to the audience. That is what I want to share with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Wai. So now we have a better idea of the housing problem in Hong Kong from a historical perspective. So maybe our question next is, how about now? And would there be any research or idea that might be able to tackle it? So up next, we'll have Professor KK Ling, Director of the Jockey Club Design Institute for Social Innovation at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Professor Ling was also the Director of Planning for the Hong Kong SAR government and President of the Hong Kong Institute of Planners. He also serves the community as Vice Chairman of the Hong Kong Housing Society. Professor KK Ling, please.
Thank you very much. Let me share my PowerPoint. Okay. Thank you, Rosman, for bringing us through the history of public housing development, and I'm grateful that Rosman showed a photo about the Chatham Road civil servant housing. That made me recall my experience when I was a primary school student. My primary school actually next to the Chatham Road civil servant housing estate, and one day my classmate invited me to his home, and suddenly I found that everybody can have a room, and the toilet and the kitchen do not need to share with another family. So that is a new discovery for a small boy who raised up in the dormitory and small public housing estates. But anyway, AIA asked me to share, I'll talk a little bit about the transitional social housing in Hong Kong, and here comes my my presentation deck. Actually, I'll try to define what is transitional housing, and I would like to share with you my work with my JCDC colleague, working on the public housing, transitional social housing projects, and then I would also share with you some initial finding about a study which we allow carrying out on transitional social housing, particularly share with you a overseas case study. Here is something about the Jockey Club Design Institute for Social Innovation. I'm the director, and I believe two of my colleagues who have joined the transitional housing project of this institute should be within the audience this evening. Transitional social housing, let us define it with these three keywords. So the first word is transitional. We consider this transitional, the sites are transitional. The sites are used for this sort of housing before they are developed for the planned use. And the buildings are also transitional. They may be used before redevelopment, or that building structure can be relocated to other places. And most importantly, the tenants are transitional because they are not expected to live forever in this housing unit, but they are expected, to move to a permanent housing in a few years' time. Social, in the sense that it provides some sort of support to the targeted individual family with specific housing need. It also, for some NGOs, they operate transitional social housing. There's also a program to help the residents to rebuild their capacity in terms of their personal capacity, social capacity, or economic capacity, so that they can be better mixed, with the society. And another objective is to create some sort of a reliable neighborhood for the individuals as well as for the community where this sort of social housing project is located. And in terms of housing, the housing accommodation, these units can be produced by renovation of an existing building or by conversion of an existing structure, for example, an abandoned school structure, or most of them are actually, in the case of Hong Kong, are purpose-built with a relocatable structure. JCDC has been involved in this transitional social housing topic since 2000. 2018, we have organized two symposia and organized a number of site visits and design workshops, and we also launched 3 action projects. We also organized a few project planning workshops for those NGOs who are interested, to undertake transitional social housing projects. We have been a member of 2 technical advisory panel for 2 such projects, and we also enable 4 NGO to implement their project execution. So far, we have produced 2 publications on transitional social housing, and all this can be obtained from the website of JCDC. We completed 1 applied research about the expandable MIC prototype design, which can be used for the construction of transitional social housing. We carried out 4 opinion survey and also organized 2 executive focus group discussion about the implementation experience of these projects. Now, for the 3 action projects we selected, because of their very unique social and environmental characteristics, so that we can develop prototype schemes to illustrate and systematically document, the technical solutions and community building considerations. And I would invite you to download this report to have a look if you are interested on this project. During the process, we also made 5 policy recommendations to the government. Actually, that was made at a electrical panel meeting. We consider that transitional social housing should be recognized as an alternative housing type in the overall housing policy, because we believe that this sort of transitional social housing will be required for a pretty long time. And we also recommended that the government should assume a more proactive role to expedite, the delivery of transitional social housing units. The transitional housing productions can be or should be enhanced, so that it can be produced in a more cost-effective way. In terms of funding, at the present moment, the government only fund the building construction of this project. Nevertheless, many NGOs who operate this project would also, operate social service packages, but this is not included as part of the funding from the Transport and Housing Bureau. And also, we consider that the government need to develop a more structured action program, to drive the transitional social housing provision. During our study and our discussion with the tenants and the operators, we derived 10 planning and design guiding principles for this transitional social housing projects. One is the principle of functionality. That is essentially, the projects are essentially to provide housing for the needed families and individuals, and therefore that has to be practical in terms of its delivery, so that we need to take away many costly ideas. Nevertheless, the project should be aesthetic, because that should not become some sort of eyesore, to the community. And this can be the aesthetics can easily be improved with a very attractive color scheme, very attractive greening proposals. The principle of decency is that that should the standard of its provision should be comparable to public housing units in terms of its size. And for example, air conditioning, connectivity to Wi-Fi, connectivity to mobile phone is some sort of very basic necessity, and even the provision of cloth drying facilities are also considered essential by the residents we interviewed. the principle of creating inclusive neighborhood, because many residents, before they moved into this sort of transitional social housing scheme, they lived in an environment that they do not have any sense of security with who live just next door to them. The principle of community integration, we believe that this sort of a scheme should be integrated with the community where it is located. Otherwise, that will attract a lot of objections and ill feeling from the existing community. And then principle of cohesive effort. It is mainly related, to the many disciplines and sectors. They need to work together to produce a transitional social housing scheme. And then the principle of sustainability, it is mainly affecting, this sort of, with passive design, they should enjoy good cost ventilation, good sunshine, and that can also contribute, to the generation of renewable energy. And the principle of flexibility is that it is sometimes very difficult for us to predict, the type of families or the type of residents we are going to accommodate in a scheme. Therefore, the design should be flexible enough, to induce changes to meet the changing needs. And the principle of relocatability is that the initial cost of such a scheme is very expensive. Therefore, to reduce its cost in the whole lifetime, all these units can be decided that can be relocated to other sites. And after all, these sites are only temporal. All right, it is not a permanent site. And then we are fortunate to obtain a funding scheme from the PICO, so that we can carry out a strategic public research on the effective delivery of transitional social housing. It has several objectives. We would like to compare the overseas experience with the Hong Kong situation, so that we can summarize what we can learn from the local as well as overseas experience. We would also look into to streamline the development control regime in order to enable a more smooth approval process for more smooth delivery of this sort of transitional social housing units. And we also would like to develop some sort of operation model so that because for a transitional housing project, it involves a lot of disciplines and trans-sectoral effort, and therefore how all these actors can play together is a very interesting subject for us to look into as well. So we have looked into some very interesting characteristics of Hong Kong's transitional social housing projects so far. First of all, it has a very clear policy objective to alleviate the hardship faced by families who are on the waiting list for public rental housing. And then in terms of housing supply, it is regarded as some sort of a short-term housing supply. Nevertheless, we believe that this sort of housing may be required for a pretty long time. And the source, majority of them are actually built, are purpose-built, and then it employ, the MIC technology for its construction. And it is a very complex nature. About, as I said, about more than 80% is provided by MIC, and most of the large-scale projects are located in rural area with inadequate utility infrastructure. And interestingly, many of these projects have its own unit layout, and this, the layout is rather non-standard, and therefore that may add to a burden about its cost effectiveness. And there involve a very complex interplay among the private developers, the NGOs, the government, and the construction consultants. All right. So if you look at this, all right, when we compare with the overseas experience, actually there are many overseas cases that we can resort to, and actually Hong Kong has derives that, in my opinion, the world's largest scale transitional social housing scheme. All right, so you can see that, in terms of quantity, Hong Kong is the largest in the world, and for the other cities, new purpose-built schemes or schemes developed from conversion of existing buildings. For the other cities, they're more or less the same. But in Hong Kong, you can see, purpose-built scheme is really dominating. In terms of scheme number, most of them are located in urban area. But in terms of unit number, about 70% are located on rural land. When we look into the existing projects or already completed or projects in progress, we found that most of the projects, require provision of sewage treatment plants. All right, because there is inadequate infrastructure services, and the most critical facility is actually sewage treatment and sewerage. That's something very interesting. We investigate some 33 transitional social housing projects, and we found that, many of them has its own design. For example, almost all projects has its own design for the 1 to 2 person units. And to sum up, so far our designs are very non-standard. All right. And there are very complex model among various stakeholders. For example, if this is government land, then the lands department is the landlord, so to grant the land, and then the Transport and Housing Bureau later on, that will be renamed as Housing Bureau, is the facilitator as well as the funder. And then the NGOs, at the end, they will become the land tenant, the project owner as well as the operator. In some landlords would lend the land for transitional social housing at nominal with a nominal rent, and then sometimes the landlord, the private landowner may collaborate directly with an NGO, so that the NGO become the land tenant, the project owner as well as operator. Nevertheless, sometimes the landlord may engage a separate agency, for example, the Hong Kong Council for Social Service, and through them, that agency will become the project manager. And when the scheme, when the construction of the scheme is completed, then an NGO will take it over as the land tenant as well as the operator of the project. And sometimes a private landowner may collaborate directly with an NGO, and then the private landowner will build the building structures, and then they hand over the building structure together with the land to the NGO, and then the NGO become the land tenant as well as the operator. So the model is very complicated with this. In our study, we found that the building of this transitional housing actually imposed some interesting challenges to the professionals. For example, if we look at this Lam Cheong Street project, all right, that is the original design scheme proposed by the architect, organized by the agent, by the NGO. However, in the design and build process, the contractor come up with a totally different scheme. All right. So originally that was a 3 separate blocks, but at the end, the contractor, who is also the producer of the MIC units, come up with a one single unit. and therefore, the architect and engineers to start with as a building designer, but at the end of the day, the MIC manufacturer as well as the contractor of the scheme, he's actually the product designer. It design and produce the individual MIC units and then assemble it on the site. It also involve a very interesting due process. The initial principle acceptance of the MIC units, which were produced outside Hong Kong, and then the GB general building plan submission about the assembled structure which is built in Hong Kong. There are different client requirements, and then the site constraints may be very severe in the Hong Kong context. We found that, for example, we look into a site in Daibo. If the facade, the site constraint can only allow a building facade of 30 meters long, and then with different combination of the width of the MIC units, it can come up with different configurations and with different effectiveness in the production of housing units. And I'm not going to go into detail about that. And and we also studied into the efficiency. We call it the modular efficiency. How many types of MIC units are used in order to produce a unit. And then we found that there are large difficulties. All right. For example, for a site. For site 1, which at the end of the day, produce more than 200 units, it only use 4 MIC unit types. All right. However, in another site, 21 living units are produced, and it use 3 unit types. And more unit types are used. It means that the higher degree of lawn standard. All right. Okay. Then I go to share a case study about Vancouver. We only found that there are useful experience in Vancouver and in London. All right. For example, in Vancouver, the landlord is government. It means that it is on government land, and then the government and the council government is also the builder. The government built, the building structure, and then it hand it over to the NGO. And so far, they produce around about 13 projects. And in the case of London, they only produce so far 3 projects. And then, and in any case, all for London, for Vancouver, and in Hong Kong, all the operators are NGOs. In Vancouver, they only have 2 standard units, all right, these 2, and then the modular efficiency ratio is pretty high, and very interesting. They make use of these standard units to assess the effectiveness of a site. And so far, through our discussion with them, any site which can cannot produce at least 39 units will be abandoned, from financial and cost-effective point of view. In terms of community management, actually the Vancouver case study indicated that they pay a lot of attention to community engagement, because they demonstrate that there's some sort of a new addition residents introduced to an existing community, and they are very much concerned about the reaction of the community. And even though the interesting point is that during the construction stage, they set up some sort of community advisory committee to supervise the construction process in order to avoid any adverse impact to the community. And even during the operation, they also has a community liaison officer stationed in the project to provide response, to any community, complaint, about the operation of this social housing project. And then they are pretty proud of their community engagement outcome. Talking about decrease in police call, after the project opening, something like that. I don't know, to a certain extent, I don't know how to interpret this, because I do not envisage, our transitional social housing project in Hong Kong will lead to any serious incident which will lead, police to intervene. Anyway, that is their practice, that they place a lot of emphasis, to on the community relationship between the scheme and the existing community. So perhaps a very short conclusion is that actually in our opinion, the transitional social housing scheme actually triggers, a paradigm shift in housing development. First of all, we consider this is a social innovation that breaks the dichotomy of public and private housing, because there are some private housing are used for this social purpose, and some private land are also used for this social housing purpose, social housing development as well. For these housing schemes, they do not only provide physical accommodations, but they also deliver community services to support, the residents as well as the community. And the NGOs, they are providers of these housing projects. As in some occasion, they are also builders as well as the operators, and then the government as facilitators to provide them with funding and to help them to overcome all the technical and approval process. It is also a very complicated development process which integrate trans-sectoral and trans-professional efforts. For example, in some conventional housing, actually the social service sector will not be involved at the very outset, but for transitional social housing, the social service sector is a very dominating player. Because of the use of the MIC unit, actually the design and production process, calls for to redefine the role of the development-related disciplines and sectors as well. For this housing, this is migrate from a purely market-oriented approach to a social need approach, particularly in terms of when private housing units are involved, private owned land are involved. And also it is leading to from quantity focus from quantity lead to social service focus, because sometimes the NGOs may give up, some housing units in order to accommodate, some facilities to provide social services to its residents as well as to the community. And I think this social housing project really generates some very interesting experience, for us to look into and discuss. Okay, so that is my end of my presentation, and I welcome you to go to our website to grab more detailed information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, KK, for sharing the transitional social housing versus conventional housing. So after KK's presentation, maybe our next question would be, how about the project execution and their current situation? So it would be good to know from the perspective of NGO, as KK said, a land tenant, project owner, and also the operator. So up next, we'll have Ms. Queenie Kwok. Queenie is the Modular Social Housing Project Manager of Policy Research and Advocacy of the Hong Kong Council of Social Service, a non-government social service agency for social welfare. The council is now working on 3 modular social housing projects in Hong Kong. Through provision of transitional accommodation and support service, the council aims to improve the quality of life for those who have waited at least 3 years for public housing and currently live in substandard or subdivided rental units. So we'll like Queenie to elaborate more. Queenie, please.
Eric, let me show my. Good evening, everyone. I'm Queenie, and Darius introduced me as I'm a project manager of the HKC and Social Housing Project, and we can all see that why we, as a NGO ourselves, why we participate in this transitional housing project is that we can all see the background of the housing with a long public housing waiting time. As first, when we are taking part in this project, the waiting time is like 4.7 years, but now we can all see that time has reached to 6 years, which is much more longer. And then we have more people waiting in the list, but most important, we find that there are many people that live in the subdivided units. They are socially isolated, which they are not able to identify the neighborhoods, and they are lack of support from the community. So that's why we start this project. And then our objective of this project is through the provision on transitional and accommodation and support service, we are able to provide this housing to those who are queuing for public housing for 3 years, and they are currently living in inadequate housing. So we have 2 baseline. Is that first of all, we have to provide the living area of social housing unit no less than 7 square feet, and this is equivalent to the public housing. And then for the rental level, we will make a reference to the maximum allowance on tenants of the CSSA or not higher than 25% of their household income. So that is our objective. And then the first project that we launched is Community Housing Movement. We launched it in 2017, which we play the role of an intermediate platform, which we will solicit and renovate those idle residential properties from the private developers. And then we will sublet it to the eligible NGOs or social enterprise, and then they will provide it to the tenants. This is our first project. And then in the next year, in 2018, we have another project called Modular Social Housing. And this is project, we will play a role as a builder and coordinator, which we, as KK said, we will mainly provide and then build a modular social housing, and then we will provide it, recruit an NGO to provide social service to the tenants. And then, as you all know, the modular social housing will make use of the MIC. And then this is the Nam Chuan Street project. The operator is Dongwa Group of Hospital. Yes. And then we can all see that from the chart, we are acting as a platform, which we will include all the stakeholders, including the government, which provide the land to us, the landlord, which provides the private land to us, the funders, and then we will include our consultants and contractors, and then to build our houses, and then we will provide to the NGOs, and through the NGOs, we will able to provide the units to the tenants. There are some figures from the community housing movement. The project actually ends in 2020 because it is a 3-year program. So in 3 years' time, we were able to provide 500 units through 40 NGOs. So to 600 households. Why it is 678 houses, not 500? Because some units they are co-housing. So one unit will have 2 households to live in. So that's why it come out. Okay. So I'll talk about more on the modular social housing project. As Derek mentioned, we have running 3 projects right now. The first of all, the 2 of them is located in Central Pole. It is in Nam Chuan Street and the Yamjiao Street. And then the third project is in Kwai Chong, Yip Sing Street. So we will provide a 1-person household unit, 2-person household, and 3-person household, and also accessible unit on the ground floor. And then we will have separate toilet and bathroom and open kitchen for them. So for the current status of each project, for the Lam Chuan Street project, the tenants have already moved in. Basically, they are going to move out this year. And then for the Yam Chao's project, the tenants has just moved in February this year. And then for the Yip Sing Street, we are still under construction progress. Hopefully, we will end the construction within this year. And then I will show you some of the photos of the original site. You can see that they are all in the urban areas with a quite good situation because they're all flatland. And then they have always sewage plants nearby. So unlike those in new territories. And then after construction, we are able to see that the Nam Chuan Street and the Yam Chuan Street project. Nam Chuan Street is 1 block only, and while the Yam Chuan Street, we have 2 blocks. They are also in 4 stories. And then there are some unit layouts of the Nam Chuan project. As KK said, that we are different layouts. So for our Nam Chuan project, we are using 2.5 module with the 2.5 width and then 12 meters long module. So we can see that there's a long module, 1 whole module, but we will divide it into 2 1-person units. And then this is 2-person units. And then also the 3-person and accessible unit. 3-person units is a whole module, so 12 meters long and then 2.5 meters width. And then so we have some experience gained. So in our Yam Chuan Street project, there are some photos showing the Nam Chuan project. You can see that the 3-unit project is especially long. You can see that. And then 1-person, 2-person, and another 3-person units. And then, so that's why in our Yam Chuan Street project, we will have some modification. We will try to use, still using 2.5 meters width, but we will try to use 6-meter module instead. So you can see that it's shorter, and then you are able to have a small bedroom for the 2-person units. And our 3-person units will make out of 2 modules. So they were more like rectangular shape, and then the accessible units. Okay, you can see some photos within the units. Yes. And then when we are operating the 2 projects, we are engaging some difficulties and challenges. For the community housing movement, which we are using idle properties, when we all know that because they are all, those units are under development. So the situation is not very good. So we will have to take time and then to take money to renovate until it is safe and good to provide it to the tenants. And then the hygiene, we will have to focus in also. And for modular social housing, again, it will take time to assess whether it is the land is suitable to use, and then the geographic situation will affect the time and cost. Like our Yip Sing Street project, we will have to, because the geographic situation is not as good as the 2 projects, so we will have to make more money to for the land. And then for the Lam Chuan Street project, it is the first project in Hong Kong, first modular social housing in Hong Kong. So we have no experience to make reference to. So we have take many times for the pre-construction work. So and challenges were encountered during the tendering and construction because we have no reference to make with. And then when it turns to operation issue, as I say, community housing movement, they have some tenants that are co-living. So sometimes disruption will occur during co-living cases. And then the frontline workers, they are all social workers. They are not like professional work professional. So they will sometimes have lack experience in handling rental collection issue or property management issue. And also many people will be aware of the exit plan because we have to ensure that when the tenancy finish, the tenant have to successfully move out, which our community housing movement have basically all move out right now. So some of them move to other social housing projects, some of them will move to public housing, but some of them actually they will have to move to private market. And then we have some conduct some social impact assessment during the community housing movement. In the 3 years, we have a theory which we have to satisfy the housing needs, and after their housing need is satisfied, and then they will have the economic and social security, and then to have more connection to the society. And then after all, when then the level 4 will be personal development, and then have the perception of social housing. And then we have some figures on the talents. Before their former home, their per capita living area is 62 square feet. But when we move to social housing, it will increase to nearly double, like 115 square meter. For the living quality, you can see that the percentage is increased a lot, because from before moving, they are basically living in subdivided units where it's very dangerous, and then the condition is very poor. And then so after moving to the social housing, the satisfaction increased a lot. For the housing expense before they move in, usually they will have to spend around $5,000 for subdivided units. But when we move to social housing, their housing expense dropped to 4,000, which is around 1,000 drop. And then for the housing security, you can see that there are many agree with this statement, like current housing makes my family and me feel secure, and they don't have to worry that the rent will go up anytime. And then many of them agree on these two sentences. And then for the economic pressure, there, as they have the rental income have reduced a lot, they will most of the household, they have reported that they increased the additional expense on interest costs for their children, and then they will have disposable income increased too. And this is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Queenie, for the sharing. So yeah, we catch the right time. So it's discussion time now. For all of us, if you have any question, please type in the Zoom chat box, and yeah, we'll then start a discussion. And yeah, Vicky is also one of our panelists to discuss. Hi, Vicky.
Oh, hi. So I will kick off with the first questions. We have actually talked a lot about the benefit of MIC, but one of the benefits that we haven't actually talked about is the sustainability. We understand MIC is very green in terms of construction, but can the panelists kind of expand a bit more on the other benefit, like the other sustainable benefit, like behind the concept of like doing MIC construction?
Hi. Thank you, Vicky. Actually, you are quite expert in MIC design construction. You should let us have your view anyway. But I think just in terms of MIC approach, I think in my opinion that will be a very promising approach for Hong Kong. After all, while we are short of construction labor in Hong Kong, actually MIC is a form of import of labor, because a lot of very labor intensive work processes will be completed outside Hong Kong. In terms of application of MIC in the transitional social housing project, I think a very key point is that how can we achieve a more standard design for our MIC units, so that you know for individual projects, they do not need to design their own MIC unit, and therefore the production of this sort of MIC units can be more cost effective. And that will enhance the speed of production and the cost of production. That's the first point. And the other point is that when we are using the MIC unit for transitional social housing, there is a assumption that these units can be relocated to another site. After all, the site is only temporal. But during that is also the assumption from the other cities in the world when they use MIC approach to develop their transitional social housing project. But as far as I know, so far there's no one a project in the world that has successfully, relocated MIC unit. Probably the Nam Chang Street project in Hong Kong will be the first one in the world, that can successfully, carry out a relocation. So we're really, proud of our Hong Kong experience, and we are very grateful to the work of Hong Kong CSS. And perhaps I don't know whether Queenie, you would like to share with us what's your plan, to prepare for the relocation of the Lam Cheong Street units.
Thank you, Professor. Yes, as I understand, this will be the first world project that relocated MIC units. Because as I said in the presentation, the tenants are going to move out in this year, basically in September. So we have to return the land to the landlord. So within the site. So we are going to yeah, I think I can help. We are going to move into another site in Tai Po, actually, in Wang Yitan. Yeah, but this will be another NGO project. So we are still negotiating with another NGO because many difficulties and challenges we encounter, like they have to come to pick up our module, and then whether the module have to maintain or not, and we are still working on this question. So, but I think it will be success at the end, so it will be able to move to the new site, because the lifetime of the module is, as I know, it should be like 40 or 40 years. So it should be able to move to site and we use. So this is also another advantage of the MIC units. And talking about using MIC, I will also want to mention a point is that the time of using MIC modules is very short, because like the module, the building of the module takes us only 4 months for Nam Chuan project. And then so the construction project can be complete within 1 year. Basically, all the transitional housing now can be complete within 1 year, no matter the size of it. So this is really a big advantage in using MIC modules.
Thank you. And let me see, I saw a question. There are 2 questions. Maybe the first one is from
Peter Pasmadian.
From Peter also. Oh yeah, because in the chat box I saw 2 and another 2. Yeah, so it's a question from Peter to Queenie. So one of the difficulties you mentioned was the co-living disputes. Does this mean that there may be 2 separate families living in the unit? If so, is that because not enough single family units? So yeah, maybe Queenie, you can let us know more about how's the arrangement and yeah, how the unit.
Okay, the co-living units, they will also only occur in the community housing movement, which make use of the idle unit, because many of the idle units, they are in Tong Lao, as Professor Wai said. Tong Lao is like very big one, so really 500 or 600 meters. Yeah, 600 feet big. So they will usually we will have to divide it into 2. Like they will have their own room. Like we have 2 families, they will have their own room, but they will have to share the kitchen and the toilet. So this will be the co-living situation. But I've mentioned this, but actually not many situations occur, because before they move in, the social worker, they will have to interview the two households that are going to co-live in one unit. Will have to like come up with some census before move into one unit, because they will have to like discuss on how to use the toilet or how to use the kitchen, and then after the discussion, they are only allowed to move into those co-living units. So with this step, the drop can be reduced much larger.
Okay, thank you, Queenie. The next question is to KK. Yeah, the audience is asking that among the 10 principles, the 10 planning and design principles that you introduced, which one do you find is the most challenging in the current context of Hong Kong housing?
I think all are very challenging, and that may differ, in different contexts. Now, first of all, in terms of, for example, the principle of predictability. All right, to start with, the NGOs and the buildings authority may get into a problem of how to approve all those how to approve those units. All right, because there are no standard, and then as I explained earlier, those MIC units are produced outside Hong Kong, and then how to enable them to go through the process. And so to start with, that is a very challenging problem. Nevertheless, in my opinion, that problem has more or less overcome with experience. And then it comes another challenging problem is on how to the funding problem. To start with, the NGOs need to carry out this study about the site and architectural design about the site out of their own pockets. They need to spend money out of their own pockets, and later on the government enhance their funding scheme to allow them to have some sort of initial funding to carry out the initial study and the design, and even get through the permission system, and then give them the biggest share of the remaining funding. So that also helped them to overcome a very important issue. And then another challenging situation is about how to integrate with the existing community. In our experience, for example, we carry out 3 prototype projects. For example, the one we proposed in Ma Wan, revitalize the old Ma Wan village, for transitional social housing, met with very strong objection from the local community. And that also happened in some other projects as well, as you can review it from the newspaper. Nevertheless, when more people in the community understand what is transitional social housing, all right, they are just ordinary Hong Kong citizens. They are waiting for the public housing. They are no different from the average guys and average families in the street. So that become more the laboring community are become more acceptance with this project, even though in some area they still enhance a lot of opposition. And then at the present moment, perhaps a very difficult problem is the technical problem, particularly for those large sites in the rural area. In terms of land formation, in terms of the inadequate or even absence in the provision of sewerage and drains. Therefore, for many projects, they need to build their own packaged sewage treatment plant in order to meet the wastewater discharge standard. And many of these sites are really located in relatively remote area, and therefore transport service is a problem, and the job availability is also a problem. And I understand that many of the NGOs are making a lot of effort, to accommodate this problem. Perhaps Queenie may share with us, for example, in one large transitional social housing project in Yunnan area. All right, the NGO also operates shops within the scheme, and they employ the residents as the employees to at least to provide some employment opportunities for them. So the issues are evolving. But so far, I think we need to be very proud of our, with our government, with our NGOs. All right, so all these problems are progressively being overcome. All right, so perhaps I stop here, and I don't know whether Queenie would like to share your experience with the audience as well.
Professor Ling mentioned that about the how the community thinks of the transitional housing project, because our 3 projects, they are all in the urban area, so they will have less against from the community, especially 2 of them is in Samtrebo, which is Samtrebo they all welcome, like they have many resources to provide with. But I do know that there are many NGOs that are working in other projects, such as like Zhangguan, as you know, and then Yunlong, and then Taipo. They do have some against on the situation, but because of the NGOs, they will have to take many time or effort or like communicate with those Chunman or like the people working around, because when we are trying to not just like providing housing or service to the tenants living in transitional housing project, we are also able like trying to build some recreational facilities for those living in the surroundings as well. So we will try to engage them to our community or neighborhood also.
Yeah, thank you, KK and Queenie. So our next question is from Winston. So can you elaborate on how reasonable quality, space, and amenities is determined or qualified? I think is it about the living quality and space and amenities in the existing transitional social housing?
Yes, I think again, perhaps I I try to provide some initial feedback. First of all, we can see that all the NGOs, including THB, they would like, in terms of size of these transitional social housing units, they would like, the objective is to make them comparable to the minimum standard of a public housing estate. All right. So more or less that is the starting point. And then in terms of other amenities, for example, vertical accessibility, is normally I would say up to now, almost all the NGOs or builder of these transitional social housing schemes or NGO agree that more or less 4 stories is the optimum height, all right, to avoid the need for the provision of lift unit, because that is costly. All right, so they will accommodate those residents with handicap issue. They will accommodate them in the ground floor, and then for the other residents, they do not have this accessibility capability problem, then they will be allocated in upper floors, and then the 4-story structure will require only a rafting foundation without the lid for piling, and then that also reduce the cost as well as the time for the construction. And then in terms of open space amenity, you can see that all these transitional social housing units provide, I would say, very good quality public open space. If you really visit them, you see kids running around happily, and if you talk to them, they are very happy. You compare with the situation when they live in a subdivided flat. All right, and then I think this is some sort of amenity that is required. And and then, as I said, all the housing units will have good, lateral ventilation as well as lateral lighting. That can meet the requirement of our buildings ordinance. All right, and then they have air conditioning, independent toilet, kitchen, even though many of them are actually open kitchen, and then. In most cases, the NGOs will provide some sort of communal facilities. All right, in some In some unit, they even provide some communal kitchens. So to enable them, if they want to have a gathering of their friends and and their relatives, they may borrow that community kitchen to have a bigger table to accommodate more people. So all these sort of communal facilities actually provided will enhance the quality of living and the esteem of the residents. So perhaps I stop here and see Queenie must have something to add.
Thank you, Professor. For the how we see reasonable for transitional housing, actually we are still having reflection on it, what is so-called reasonable, because I'm not sure because we are providing transitional housing. So as Professor Ling said, the quality cannot be like to be higher than the public housing. But there are some provision that we will think that it is necessary to have. For example, like air conditioners and water heaters, because these two we think it is basic provision, but like the THB will not think it is a basic provision. So they're not allow us to have these two appliances, and NGO has to have their funding in order to provide these two appliances. This is the most significant example, because we think that transitional housing tenants, they only live for like 2 or 3 years, they will move to other housing. So it's not they will be difficult for them to bring their own appliances to live. We will they will just live here and bring all their belongings to here, and then they live and then to stay for 2 years. For another issue like window grills, basically all of us will think it have to be provided, but THB, they have another view, of course. So for the public space, as a social organization, basically all of them, they will want to have more space. They have to make a balance between the budget, because the budget is very limited, and then they have to use it to build the model to MIC models and then another construction. So they will have many NGOs will face difficulties on it. Like for us, we were not able to create a very large area of public space in Nam Chan, but we will just have very short EVA. But basically, we'll find that the children, they are able to find their interest in it. Like they will play badminton in the EVA, and then they will because they feel safe in this area. So their parents will allow them to like running around and play badminton in this very small space. So we will also want to gather some information from all the NGOs, and then to see whether we have come up with some so-called reasonable criteria of transitional social housing that we're going to do. Also.
Yeah, but I think, and Queenie pointed out a very important point. The sense of security is really important. You can see kids, running in the corridor, playing in the playground, and you would not see this happen, in a subdivided, unit accommodation. For example, some provisions when we carry out, a focus group discussion with some of the subdivided flats tenants, they're expecting that they may be able to be accommodated in a transitional social housing when we consult them about the design. In an occasion, all the housewives immediately ask us, would there be provision for drying of their clothes? All right, so those drying rack, it appears to be, pretty ordinary, but they consider this is extremely important. And in a steering committee, which I was invited as a member for a transitional social housing project, all right, when the NGO get through, all the approval process and the contract and the construction work is going to start, and then the first thing they need to take care of is to embark another fundraising campaign, to buy air conditioner and heaters for their units, because the government funding do not include the provision of these domestic appliances, even though they would allow a window a air conditioning window unit to accommodate a air conditioner, but the air conditioner itself is not part of the funding. Likewise, they can provide, the sufficient cable connection to support electric heater, but the heater itself is not a part of the funding scheme. So the NGOs need to raise funding for these very basic domestic appliances. So I think that's a question whether what is decent living, what is reasonableness in the quality of living is really a problem. Or we can have further discussion with the government.
And then next maybe a question from myself, because maybe two questions. So the first one is there any transitional housing in Hong Kong before, like in the history? Professor Wai, do you know that?
Yes, there were, and in fact, the transitional housing that time was called interim housing, and then it is for those people that that are not eligible for the public housing. So they may be coming to Hong Kong less than 7 years. They are not Hong Kong citizens, and then and that was built in two-story type. 2-story high, low rise, but then in Sai Kung, and then there was one is I think I remember it's 5 stories, and then in fact that was at that time it is not called MIC, but then at that time it is we used a kind of a Tilden's structure, which is a prefabricated structure that was used in Kobe, in Japan for after the earthquake. And then we build this, and then that is when I look at the plans for the transition and housing. In fact, that was very similar, and also because of it is on the module, but then it can be changed to either from 2-person to 10-person and unit, and supposedly that can be dismantled and rebuilt. And I think that is the one that we have used in the Whitehead Point, is it? Basset Golf. Was it for those was it Vietnamese? And then they have used it, and then they have rebuilt that. And at that time we adopted that in the Sai Kung area, but then because when after it's 5 years or 10 years, and then we want to rebuild this, but then in fact nowhere else do we need those housing. So that wasn't. But then supposedly that could be dismantled as well. And later on, and this kind of what we call the interim housing, or now is the kind of transitional housing, and the tenants are slightly different, but almost the same. And then there was in the Long Bin in Yuen Long, and also in I think Tin Shui Wai as well. And then we built this in concrete, and then which is 40-story high. And then so there are smaller unit than the public housing, and then that was built, and I think it's now demolished already, or I don't know. Yes, and so it is we have that.
Thank you. But maybe a question to all of you is that projecting the future, do you think we need to build more transitional housing? Is it a trend? Because what I heard is like now the period of living in a transitional housing is 2 to 3 years, but the waiting time for the public housing is actually now going beyond like 6 years. So does it mean we actually need to build more transitional social housing, and at the same time we may also need to consider to elongate the period of time that people can stay inside? What's your opinion about that?
Perhaps I start first. In my opinion, if we're looking at the provision of the public housing units, I think the community may envisage, the queuing will become a little bit longer, foreseeable several years, until much larger amount or public housing units can be produced in the Lofton metropolis, as well as the Lantau tomorrow reclamation. So in my opinion, this sort of transitional social housing will be littered in the perhaps in the next 10 or 13 years. Of course, there is a limit, to build to further increase the provision of these transitional social housing units. Again, there's a matter of land availability. At the present moment, if you look at those rural sites, these are land actually the developer are waiting for a more profitable development. Nevertheless, the provision of infrastructure by the government to enable higher density development is not in place. All right. So if you look at those sites in Yuen Long, many of them actually they may be within the new development area boundary or just outside the new development area, and perhaps even they may be now included in the additional proposed development area under the Lofton Metropolis Development Strategy. But they still need time, to wait for the coming of those high capacity infrastructure to support high density housing development. So in my opinion, within the next 10 to 15 years, this sort of idle land will still be available, and to make them to be used for transitional social housing is a reasonable use of our land resources. So that's my opinion.
I can make some because I agree with Professor Ling that basically it will be transitional social housing will maybe last at least for 10 years because of the shortage of the provision of the public housing. And actually for the tenancy of the tenants, as I said before, their waiting time is like from 4.7 years to 6 years already. So whether we have to increase the criteria from like they have wait for 3 years to 4 years, but they will have to discuss. But the first project is at Lam Chuan, we will only allow them to live for 2 years because of this is the first trial project. So they are only allowed to live for 2 years, and then the landlord have to return the site to landlord. But for the other projects, basically they are able to live for 3 years right now, and some of them they can even live to like 5 years, depends on the tenancy of the site. So if they can live for like 5 years, and then they have wait for like 3 years, and supposedly they're able to move to public housing. And then if not, we are like trying to figure out whether they can move to other transitional housing, because there are many of them coming right now. So like our Lam Chuan project, some of them will move to Yuen Long site. They will move to other transitional social housing projects.
I see. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. I think time is running out. It's 9 o'clock now, time for dinner. So I really enjoyed the discussion with you all, and I believe all our audience are also enjoying it as well. So this discussion about transitional social housing or housing in general in Hong Kong, I think should not end here. So again, thank you very much to all our speakers, Rosman, KK, Queenie, and also the panelists, Vicky, and all other audience. So last but not least, just 1 minute, because it's a short promotion time from the Young Architects Group, Chair Ms. Fei Mui, about the UAPV, just 10 seconds. So they are now helping to organize the UAPV 2022 Seeds of Resilience and calling for volunteers to build this memory bank at the Victoria Harbour. So if you want to know more details or you're interested to be part of them, please register, scan this QR code, or to get more information in this website. Yeah, so thank you very much to all of you again. So so I think that's the end of the event tonight.
So thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Have a good night.